And we are not to the point yet where everyone is trained and understands that this is, again, when there's lack of substantial progress. Permanency plan hearing. This was a big victory. We used to wait to 12 months to decide, okay, now what? But we've decided with children under the age of 7, we need to push the cases faster. So the permanency hearing now occurs at 9 months. And at 9 months, you're saying, okay, are we really making progress? Are we going to be able to reunify? How long is it going to take? What services need to be in place? If a child is older than 7, then we do it at 12-month intervals. If we did not succeed in reunification, we go to termination of parental rights. There were not really substantial changes in the code, and the question that's raised often is that, and position that people argue, is that it's too hard to terminate parental rights. That simply isn't true. The code is set up very clearly. The issue is whether you put up sufficient evidence. And if you do not put up the expert testimony, and if you don't have lawyers who are well trained to represent the department and to present the department's case, then you're going to run into difficulty with termination of parental rights. But the problem with termination of parental rights is not in the statutory scheme. Now, other topics of importance that I don't have time to talk about today in the judicial process is there is an option besides termination of parental rights. If you have children placed with relatives, they can petition for a permanent guardianship, and we are doing that more and more and finding that to be reasonably effective. We also have now an area for front-loading services where we deal with families before we get to removal, child in need of services. Bartow County has set up a problem-solving model in partnership with the Department of Family and Children's Services. And once that is run for a while, I think it would be valuable for us to have a report from them about what they're finding and what they think the implications are for how to use child in need of services to assist us in having fewer dependency cases. And then one of the things that I really like the department to do, when people do not work their family preservation plan, rather than coming to me and asking for removal, I ask the department to bring the case as a protective order so that I can force the family to do the things without getting to the point of removing the children. So that family preservation piece. I want to make certain that you know that problem-solving courts are available in the juvenile courts. If you've never attended a family drug treatment court, I really think that's a valuable piece of work. And I encourage you to go to an accountability court and see the intensive case management, and you would be amazed at how complex these issues are. There are two things that I want you to go away with from family drug treatment courts. I did not understand how many parents had been physically abused and sexually abused and in very violent relationships before substance abuse became critical to their survival. And once I understood the role of trauma with parents, then I understood how important it is to identify trauma with children, with teens, with parents, and address the underlying issues. No one is going to be mentally healthy. No one is going to be substance-free if we don't deal with the trauma of childhood. When the CDC did a study with Kaiser Permanente on adverse childhood experiences, the results were stunning. Kaiser did this research to try to determine in people over age 50 what was the best predictor of chronic health problems. They thought it would be lifestyle. They thought it would be diet. They thought it would be things like smoking and things like drinking. It was not. It was adverse childhood experiences. The more bad things that happened to you as a child, the more likely you were to die young and to have chronic health problems. So we are talking about abuse and neglect as a serious public health crisis because we are setting up people for lifelong issues. The other type of problem-solving court I have is 0 to 3. We intensively case manage baby cases. And when I began this work, I was told that we could not place infants and toddlers in foster to adopt homes, that they would never work with parents. And that turned out not to be true. We are doing a much better job with our infants and toddlers by the department allowing me some flexibility, allowing me to be able to use foster to adopt homes, and allowing a partnership between birth parents and parents. Because when reunification fails, those birth parents are coming in and signing voluntary surrenders. And you've helped us out with the code because now there are contract provisions to allow parents to visit with their biological children post-adoption. So we have done some very, very good work over the last 10 years. Yes, we have problems, and yes, we need more work done. But please understand that in terms of safety, we have done good work. In terms of permanency, we've done good work. Now we need to focus on well-being. But at this point in time, I think I have a few minutes to answer questions unless somebody cuts me off and tells me I'm done. Thank you. Yes, Ms. Williams.
I was just going to ask, does judicial oversight continue for a young person who ages out at 18?
Yes.
And what does that look like?
We don't know. Yes, the code says now that we have judicial oversight for adults up to the point of, I think it's age 23, Melissa. And we are putting those protocols in place, and it would be wonderful if Empowerment worked with us on what you would like that to look like. Judge Crawford is working on that, and all of us would welcome assistance because none of us know exactly what that needs to look like. CASA has a good implementation guide. CASA's also interested in working on that. So, yes.
So our next session, we're going to be discussing why parents abuse, but I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what the process is like for you and what you typically see in your courtroom. You've mentioned substance abuse.
Yes.
But what are some of the other big kind of obstacles that these parents are facing, and what are some of the maybe low-hanging fruit you see in terms of opportunity? I know that parental expectations around child development are often very unreasonable, and that can be a reason why they abuse. But I'm just curious, from your side of the bench, what are you seeing in terms of the caregivers you're working with?
Well, what we see changes over the course of time, but I can tell you what things we see consistently, and then as far as right now, the big thing in terms of substance abuse is the prescription substance abuse, and also the use of methadone during pregnancy. That's an enormous issue that we are struggling with and that we continue to struggle with. And it's more difficult to deal with families because it's legal to get the pills, it's legal to get the methadone, legal to get alcohol, and of course, they don't necessarily recognize that they're pregnant, and they use all these things, and we will have babies born with methadone addiction, and some of them may be in the hospital anywhere from maybe 6 weeks to 6 months because the problems are so incredibly acute, and that's really, really a difficult time for these babies to see a drug-addicted baby that's born. Another thing that we're seeing with some degree of frequency is parents with psychosis, and they tend to have fairly large sibling groups. We do not have good mental health family support services. We have issues with housing and with case management, coordinating between case management for child welfare and mental health. Another thing that we see is that we see a lot of lack of supervision, and we think that it's really parenting issues, and we think that we're working on parenting skills, but what we usually find once we've done the work is that it's more likely to be substance abuse or mental health. We have issues with postpartum. I don't think we've recognized the extent to which we need to monitor women post-birth on the postpartum issue, and I don't think we're doing a good job of spotting and treating postpartum. And we're not doing a good job of keeping those women who are Medicaid eligible signed up and on Medicaid and getting the treatment that they need while they are eligible. Another thing we don't do well is keep the children who have developmental delays in the Part C services.
Do you see more children who are abused who have some type of either medical or underlying developmental
Excellent.
condition?
Children will have more medical issues for a variety of reasons. First of all, if you have experience, and Dr. Greenbaum is much better at talking about this than I am, but toxic stress in the body produces cortisol, and cortisol impairs the growth and impairs the health. So they will have 4 to 5 times greater rates of health issues, but also of developmental delay. And in terms of learning, it impairs cognitive function and language comes slower. And we see more behaviors as opposed to language. So these are your children who are getting kicked out of your pre-K and getting kicked out of your child care and who are having really, really behavior problems in kindergarten because their language is their behavior.
Thank you. Can you speak a little bit more about the issue of interstate compact? I'm from Columbus, and you're exactly right in terms of people living on both sides of the river and across state lines. What are you suggesting that we might do to address that?
Well, one of the things I would say is that if you can support the work that's being done with border agreements, that has helped us a lot. And Judge Brent Hammond has been working on behalf of the Council of Juvenile Court Judges, the Administrative Office of the Courts, to do border agreements with Alabama, with Florida, with South Carolina, with Tennessee, to assist us in getting cooperation to get this done faster. But my suggestion is that we do our interstate compact applications on the computer and send them electronically to the state, and for the state to work with the feds to get them sent electronically, because it would speed up the process. They are delayed for all kinds of reasons, like waiting for a birth certificate. And I'm like, no, we don't need to wait for a birth certificate. I worked out with the probate judge that if I ask for a birth certificate, I get it the moment I ask for it. So we don't need to have delays. Yes.
I guess your comments about all this emphasis on reunification, and we don't have the alternative plans. 80% of these people have substance abuse issues, whatever the percentage is, medical or mental issues. We're kidding ourselves, maybe, that we're putting the kids back in this environment. And what's the answer? Do we need to have alternative plans from the get-go, number one?
Yes.
That's my question. And I guess my second question, just after sitting here and listening to you for 30 minutes, if you put your top 10 together, what you think this committee needs to do, those of us that are lay people, I'd really like to see that.
I'd love to give you a top 10 list. Foster homes is number 1. In case I haven't said that 5 times yet. No. Let me caution you.
No, there's some of those Methodist systems, you gotta be careful here.
I understand. Now, we have some people in here who represent outstanding homes, so I don't want to say anything contrary to that. But nationally, there is a big push to move from congregate care, and let me explain why. If you look at child sexual exploitation, they are recruiting from a group home setting. And some group homes are not monitored well, unlike the people in this room. These are places that are well-staffed, well thought out, where they're developing relationships. But in some group homes, you have people who are serving 8-hour shifts as a job. It's not about raising children. It's not about engaging in relationships. And those types of settings have made it possible to recruit children from foster care into child sexual exploitation big time. So there is a national movement against congregate care. I just want you to be aware that that is going on. What I'm talking about is we desperately need foster homes, and we need therapeutic foster homes. With teenagers still need one-on-one time. They're not so willing to accept it, and it's a lot harder to get their trust, but they need it just as much as that infant and toddler needs it, and sometimes they need it more because their risk-taking behavior is so much more. So I do think that we've got to be thoughtful about how we recruit people for teenagers who can cope with teenagers, relate to teenagers, and engage teenagers. That's no easy task.